The hero of this story, 19-year-old Reian Azura, is an ordinary lab rat. He has in himself a very unusual power, and the power that was given to him by the god himself. He will face many hardships that may break him. He can be tough, but most of the time he's a soft-hearted guy. The power he's gained, the special eye, is the very thing that will keep him alive. It's time now to play God's real game and show your worth. The beginning of the story sees our hero closing his eyes to sleep while in a dream world. He opened his eyes, and his eye is unlike any other. They are amethyst-colored, and the pupils are like a star in the night sky. In an open, empty white space all alone lies our young hero. It seems this place was his end. Lying in the same spot at first, he thinks about who he really is and where he is. Just trying to remember something, his head would immediately break down and spin, as if something was preventing him from doing so. There is only a fog in his head, and his body is chained, and his very clothes do not please him very much. Fully functioning, he decides to see what this place is and stands up to look around. After looking around in the horizon, he sees nothing but white emptiness and does not understand which way he should go. He ran through all this space without missing a single thing around him, and exhausted, he comes running to some place. His puffiness makes you think of him competing in the Olympics in track and field. To him, all those few hours of useless wandering seemed as if it had been going on for an eternity or longer. However, suddenly his attention is drawn to something very strange that even his eyes at the sudden movements left a trace. When he looks in the distance, he sees a small black object that is quite far away from him. With full hope and certainty that he is not alone here, he gathers the strength to make a run for it. He even speeds up harder since he wants to meet people and discuss what this mystical place is all about. Upon arriving there, everything in his mind changes and he abruptly stops for no reason. What he saw there threw him into complete shock and incomprehension of what this space was. There was a girl who was covered in blood, as if she was the main figure in a big battle. Our hero was obviously not prepared for this sight, as his gag reflexes kicked in at that moment. Such a picture has changed his inner world and makes him start to get scared of this scary place. Except that even in such a seemingly critical situation, our hero does not despair and demands calmness from himself. And the only thing that can help him calm down is a breathing practice to refresh his train of thought. Somehow, as if some lever in his head had worked, he changed completely, just as his expression changed. Then looking again at the corpse of the girl, he noticed in himself that he no longer felt fear or disgust. While he was watching this picture, someone comes up behind him and grabs him by the shoulder. In the same second, all of our hero's reflexes kicked in and he turns back at the fastest possible speed. There was some man standing behind him asking about what happened to this girl and if he did it. After he saw the man behind him, all concentration went away. He immediately began to nervously deny. Having done a full analysis beforehand, this grown man gives him a hand to get up, for the dead man has a sword notch on his chest. They grab each other's hand and pull each other up. Apparently our hero has found a partner in misfortune. Getting up, of course, the first thing one does is scout out where they are, but the long-haired man is also unaware of the location. The redhead tells him that he doesn't even remember his name, but he doesn't understand how the man removed the chains. The black-haired man immediately looked at his hands. He obviously didn't understand what chains our protagonist was talking about. Nameless replies with a questioning tone that he didn't even have them, and he woke up immediately completely free. This information clearly upset our hero, that he even sighed upon learning that he was the only one who was tied up in the move. Suddenly, during the conversation, a system notification sounds, and a man looking up shouts to our hero, pointing at something. Some paper flies in, and he catches it without realizing what it's doing here or how it got here. He began to read what was there with a confusion about what it all meant, for there was his biography with information. Apparently now our main character's name is Reian Azura. His age is 19 and he is looking for his sister. And the long-haired man's name is Tengen Chu. He is 35 years old and has a wife. Along with that, he has 3 children. When he sees it all, he starts to freak out, not realizing whether it's all true or someone's evil joke on him. The system designates them as adversaries and begins the process of putting weapons in their hands. In our hero's throat were some sort of sensors controlling electrical currents that traveled down the height of his body. Like a Pandora's box, he opens his palms and something very strange appears before him with a bright light. This thing was a double-bladed sword that just appeared in his hands out of nowhere. Tengen as well as our hero got his weapons, which turned out to be paired sai, and the system required a battle. The notification to kill his opponent in 5 minutes shocked the boy who had only recently woken up. The god game has become the place that will determine their end, and if they can continue, one of them will become a god. After the instructions, a timer for exactly 5 minutes appeared right in the middle of them, and a notification for them to start the battle. Good-hearted Reian couldn't believe he'd have to fight a man he didn't even know. The report had already started, and the first seconds of the timer were already gone. The clock started ticking, adding to the stress. In a panic, our hero tries to persuade Tengen to give up the idea of fighting, because everything that happens there cannot be real. Yelling at the redhead, he responds by saying that this can't all be a simple joke by some rich prankster. It seems that Tengen had already done his own analysis before that, because he had already realized that their memories had been erased, and they were wearing suits that could not be removed. All his guesses seem to be true, but only to avoid going crazy, our hero again calms himself. Mental Tengen was already ready to kill the red-haired man, because without any doubts he rushed to the attack. Only one breathing practice was able to help our hero in making sense of the situation. His brain has started working much faster, causing him to even be able to anticipate Tengen's attacks and dodge them. His whole body was as light as a feather, and his eyes saw something that an ordinary person cannot grasp. The moment he dodged, a light appeared in front of his eyes that pointed into the hull of the long-haired man. The voices in his head screamed at him, demanding that he kill his enemy because his instincts wanted only one thing, that he survive. After his punch, the black-haired man stopped, as if he didn't want to continue taking the fight any further. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, so he throws his weapon in the air, but catches back up. Looks like he's already made up his mind that he's going to have to kill the man. With just one attack, Tengen put a sai right into our hero's leg, but he didn't have time to dodge. The fact that he lost his concentration almost cost him his life, and the pain was just hellish for him. The black-haired man continues his attack without stopping for a single second, but our hero doesn't understand why he doesn't hesitate. To avoid getting another stab right in the back, he turns back to look at him. Anticipating his blow to the neck, he crouches down, dodging his blow. Now there was the perfect chance to strike. Answering him in the same way he did himself, delivering a slashing blow directly to his stomach, this might slow down the Tengen's attacks. Except that the long-haired man's second weapon, which he had planted earlier in the round, had done its damage. Tengen also took a hard hit right in the stomach area, causing his breathing to shorten. Clutching the weapon in his hands, he decides to pull it out, because otherwise he will lose and the fight will end in his death. All this pain that he hadn't felt before coming to this place manifested itself in just the first 2 minutes of the fight. With a scream of hellish pain, he lubormally pulls the weapon from his leg, and around him was a lasuzha of his own blood. The tears flowed on their own like a waterfall, and even clenching his teeth didn't help get rid of the damned feeling. Sitting in the same place, he begins to think that he can easily win if he frees himself from his chains. With tears in his eyes, he starts hitting the chains with his weapon harder and harder to finally break free. His eyes were filled with helplessness, for this young man did not want to die and end his life in a place like this. And while he was getting rid of the shackles, another weapon flies into his shoulder, causing him to lose his coordination completely. It was as if he had fainted from the blow falling down on his back in pain, and his mouth was a fountain of blood. Tengen stands there with his weapon thrown at him, as if he's thinking about something and thinks of his actions as wrong. Completely bled out with 2 deep wounds, our hero lies there, writhing in pain as the long-haired man raises his sword. The black-haired man is ready to kill our hero right now, excited to win right now. Still not losing his last hope of survival, he tries to grab and pull the sai from his shoulder. And in his mind, he thinks that if he had killed him at the beginning, he wouldn't be lying there without strength just before his death. In his moment of doubt, right before his eyes flashed again that purple swak that led straight into Tengen's neck. He's giddy as if he sees a light at the end of the tunnel, and his instincts tell him to kill this stranger. Tengen was about to put his sword right into our hero's head with all his might, but at the last moment he dares to get up from his seat. The fact that he didn't hit begins to unnerve the long-haired man, and he begins to overflow with determination in killing our hero. While the thoughts were haunting him, our hero was already flying straight towards him, for now he could not be stopped by human morality. Without a moment's hesitation, our hero finally thrust his sword right into Tengen's throat. It seemed to surprise him so much that he forgot about the pain. After the blow, he immediately dodged the next blows. This moment was a moment for him to grow. The long-haired man was distracted by the sei in his neck, and our hero was already approaching him from behind to put his chains around his neck. Pulled the black-haired man's neck toward him with the chains blocking his access to oxygen. And each time our hero pressed harder and harder, and the thought of death simply terrified Tengen. He tearfully asked our hero for mercy, because he has children to whom he must return and a wife who is waiting for him. While everything was turning black in front of his eyes, our hero apologized to him before the end, saying he was sorry. Our hero forced Tengen down without any pity and pulled the chains harder and harder. Complete aggression and determination in killing a man filled the head of our hero. Now nothing could stop him. Just a little bit of effort that he applied to the chain was able to completely break the Tengen's neck, and a terrible crunch was heard in the silence. Our hero apparently wasn't ready to kill a man, because he fell into a deep depression and his circuit stained. Except he didn't feel anything even after that, as if the man in front of us wasn't what he was in the beginning. He began to search his pockets for something, and his thoughts were filled with strange musings. What he pulled out was the piece of paper that started this whole thing. Taking it, he began to open it. Holding his weapon in his shoulder with his hands, he continued to stare at the paper, thinking about something philosophically important. There was not a single feeling in his mind at the killing, no pity, no sadness, no anything other than his duty. He did what he had to do, for in other cases he would have died on his own, but now he needed answers to all his questions. With full resolve, he decided to continue his journey, and if he ever found the one who had locked them here, he would make him perish. Time was running out, and 5 hellish minutes that seemed like an eternity had only now passed. In the bright light above our hero, a message sounded that contestant number 35,000 named Rayan Asura had won. All of this surprised him quite a bit, and it seemed that up above he saw something behind the bright light. An unknown voice said that he was a god. The fact that he was able to see God for the first time struck him very strongly, and apparently his whole idea of him became different. His very body and brain decided that he should right now bow down to the powerful being. In the sky hovered the same god in a golden cloak and looking like an alien who came to our hero. His face is either hidden under the face of a robot or he is the Aztec totem, and he asks about our hero's feelings. Looking up at the god in the sky, he doesn't understand what this hovering humanoid creature is talking about. The god with the crown on his head asked him again how he was feeling, and he kept looking at the god. Realizing what he's talking about in his eyes again, he remembers the moments from the battle with Tengen and how he killed him without pity. The picture of Tengen lying in a pool of blood and not breathing comes to mind. All those pictures in his head made his whole body shudder with fear, and he began to hesitate in his answer as well. God was still waiting for him to gather his thoughts and was eager to know the answer, and our hero slowly began to speak. With the face of a madman and a grim aura, he spoke through force about how everything he had felt was simply magnificent. His answer amused the god, and he liked his answer, for he was doing what his mind told him, not his heart. Seizing the moment, our hero decided to ask him his questions, and the place turned out to be a space to play. The answer was that he had moved 2 million souls here. It made the hero think about everything. Shouting at the Almighty, he asked for an explanation of why he doesn't remember anything and why he is here. This properly asked question pleased the god, and he raised his hand and began to fill his palm with some kind of light. His explanations were vague and inaccurate because there are 2 million souls, one game, and each of these souls has one wish that they want to fulfill no matter what the situation. The answer didn't seem to please our hero, and he started harassing the god himself, asking what he was even talking about now. Except that in that very second, something clutched his throat, and he couldn't even make a sound. Something was blocking him. Raising his head, he looked at the god, while he himself could not even inhale a breath of air, nor could he say anything. Pointing his hand towards our hero, the god ordered him that he dare not interrupt him and not to interrupt. With his crumbling hands, he pointed downward as if trying to show our hero something. And when the god pointed downward, the gravitational force next to our hero increased, forcing him to duck harder. Thus, God showed our hero that all his powers are limitless, because he created the universe and everything in it. In front of my eyes at the narration, the moments of how the guy in the cloak killed that girl with a sword came to mind. The way the full pool of blood left the corpse in space, but the god kept talking about how there would only be one winner, a merciless-looking blondie, and words to the effect that those who can't get through the game will simply perish in God's game. Hearing all this with a cry, our hero asked God why he needed all this. Instead of some compelling reason, he heard that it was all just entertainment for God and the others. Gravity continued to press down on him, but without giving up, he asked about who the others with him were. But he could not get an answer, because he should find out about all this after much more time had passed. Clutching a shard of light in his hands, the god spoke of what our hero would learn about everything, about the game and about himself. The shard shattered after a strong compression, and the god kept saying that by reaching the end, our hero will know the Estina of the whole world. But if you leave all this for later, the main task of our hero for now is just to continue to survive day by day. That's all he can and should do. It puts our hero in a stupor, because it sounds easy, but in fact it's too complicated. As soon as the god left him with his last words, our hero's shackles broke like chips, and now he can freely use his hands. He was wished a pleasant game, and teleported to some other space that was covered with metal plates. Now he decides to fully inspect the entire area, and discovers other participants like himself. There were other people who even grouped together and chatted about something, looking directly at our hero. Looking at the others, he also notices that they all have the same clothes, or at least the design of the clothes is very similar. He was being stared at by the same blonde guy who killed that girl from the beginning of the story, and looking closely at the contestants, he also saw a child who happened to be one of the contestants and seemed to be yawning with boredom. However, he began to realize that all the people, including the child, were only here because they had killed their rival. And at the end of this space was a door, and on top of it a sign told our hero to find a partner for the next round. He clenches his fist because everyone who is here will be his enemies, so he can't show them his weakness. He walked forward with a confident gait, thinking in his head that he needed to look very strong so that no one would mistake him for weak. Except he's thinking about the fact that if Tengen had survived the first round, everyone would have assumed at first glance that he was strong. As he approaches some robot, he assures himself that since he killed Tengen, he's the strong guy here. He is gaining unprecedented confidence to go through all the Ravundas and become a god, or still fulfill his cherished wish. The robot in front of him greeted him not by name but by participant number, and wished him all the best in God's game. Turning his head, the robot asks him if he is ready for the second round of this game. The mannequin repeats what he said before, as if our hero didn't quite understand what he said. The fact that such a robotic mannequin spoke very surprised our hero, and he even stepped back a little out of fear. Bot introduced himself to the redhead as Mr. Era, and the mannequin was ex officio an assistant for the second round. Taking advantage of the moment, our hero decides to ask Mr. Era where they are, but someone interrupted him. Some group approached our hero, saying that the bot would not tell him anything because they had already tried to question him. After scratching his neck, this seemingly villainous guy asks our hero his story. When he saw the crowd in front of him, the hero was of course wary, and thought that he was the target of these piranhas. When confronting him, our hero said that he knew nothing, and in response asked him if he remembered his past life. But the answer was no, and he decided to extend his hand representing himself as Damage. And he started saying some warm words about how they could get through this hell together. When he spoke, our hero noticed that his mouth was coming from a strange yellow light in his direction. Suddenly a sharp heartbeat, which was very sudden, like a blow to a blind man. Our hero fell down feeling as if he had been stabbed by some huge sword right in the heart area. However, once he checked the site of the pain, he found no cuts or blood from the wound, as if magic was working here. The damage all kept pressing on our hero, whom he attacked right in the spavin area, reaching out to him. With a smile like that of a deranged psychopath, he asks our hero what happened to him, even though he was the one who attacked him. Our hero was furious at him, while concurrently thinking about how this guy had gotten such power in just one round. He continued to be looked down upon with a smile, and the redhead realized that only the strongest survive in this world. The villain's amusement was stopped by the very Blornden ordering Uran to stop walking in their direction. Damage starts to justify himself by showing his hands, talking about how he didn't even touch his body to hit. Such an insolent lie began to anger our hero, and he turned back to look at the one who was coming. There was a blonde guy looking him straight in the eye and telling him to keep his head down. Turning to the villain, clasping his hand, feeling the fact that he is the protagonist, talking about how he hates such more than anything else in the world, and pulls his hand in his direction while causing some kind of red aura on his hand, and discharges appeared. Right in his hands in just a few milliseconds, a huge katana like the real samurai of their antiquity appears. The fact that he was so easily able to summon the weapon was able to surprise our hero, who could not take his eyes off the sight. The girls who were watching all this began to think that as soon as he drew his sword, a helper should have joined in to separate everyone. And the villain started walking backwards, telling the savior that he didn't need all this trouble at all, and it was just a routine check. The masked guy tells him to ask one of his lackeys behind him about the partnership. Suddenly, everyone turns to our hero and starts asking about the fact that the red-haired man will be a companion for the masked man. Except that it made the hero feel insecure, because he hadn't shown his abilities and he might be useless in the second round. But the masked guy should have chosen Euron for the test because he's not a weak guy, which is obvious from his abilities. But standing up, he had already decided that the best solution would be to just agree, because it would be the perfect chance to get a good ally. Standing up, he walked towards him and introduced himself immediately as Rayan Asura, extending his hand. And the masked man stares at our hero's hand, while he thinks about getting a strong partner for the next round. Successfully, they become a team, and the masked man introduces himself as Takeda Shingen. Turning around, not expecting anyone, they are going to go for the next round, except our hero wants to consult with the doll. But Mr. Ira begins to criticize our hero, and he grudgingly asks the bot for information about the second round. Except that no additional information will be spoken by the offended Mr. Yera, and all instructions will be relayed on the way out. As soon as our hero got his answer, Takeda started calling out to him, telling him that they shouldn't waste time here. Blondine's words make our hero start to worry, because he does not understand why to rush in such a situation. Takeda, who is walking ahead, opens the door and pulls it open by the handle, whereupon a creaking sound is made from the door. Finally, the first round begins, and before them stands a black space in which even the light itself is absorbed. Noticing this, our hero also thought that this door leads to a bottomless abyss. However, Takeda didn't seem to care all that much because he just walked on regardless of the fact that there was only a void in front of them. The masked man kept walking, and rocks appeared below as if creating a path. All this makes our hero think that magic also exists, and from behind he started to call out to Euron. Along with his gang in the back, he said they could still meet. This guy is a real badass. But I don't think our hero will be able to meet them because they'll all die before they reach him. Already more confidently, our hero went forward, saying that they will certainly not see each other again. Takeda only says this once they're inside because if our hero is useless, they'll just get rid of him. Our hero smirks too, thinking that this masked guy is a bit too straightforward. The response and follow-up to what he said was that he didn't want to carry garbage all over the game until the end. As soon as the path ends, there is a door there. Opening it, light appeared from all crevices. It seems adaptation is important here. All this blinding bright light is apparently not to the liking of our hero, who is already used to darkness. And so they finally stepped onto solid ground that would stand regardless of space. The door behind them began to crumple and disappear, making a pinching sound behind them. Something ahead apparently very much surprised the hero, more than the door that disappeared by itself. Up ahead was another group of two people. One was an old man and the other some young girl. Our hero began to completely condemn this game, thinking that old people clearly had no place in this game, even though he had seen a child before. Takeda immediately asks our hero if he has any preferences, but he didn't understand. Then, as usual, he asked more directly who he wanted to kill first out of the two. This question, of course, pressed hard on our hero, who was still acting like a little rebbe. The opponents begin to make nice and greeting each other, but Takeda proves to be much more ostentatious. He stops with the pleasantries, saying they've had enough and should start fighting. The old man also realized that Takeda was being overly cautious and wanted him to loosen up a bit and reveal his name. Turning to our hero, he warns that they should just keep quiet. He doesn't understand why this is necessary. And a little more time, after which he realized that he cannot get close to the enemies, because then it will be harder to kill them. Only the girl with the satric must be okay here, because they introduced themselves as Sarah and Jurin. The same light appeared as when God came, saying that the second round would soon begin and they should wait. A mannequin like Mr. Yera showed up and talked about explaining the rules. Looking up, our hero also thought about the fact that the bot up there looked a lot like Iru, only slightly different. According to the rules of the game, whoever holds that ball will earn 1 point every second, and will lead the team to victory. And as soon as 15 minutes have passed, the game will end and the winner will be the one who earns more points by the end. The penalty for losing is that they will be thrown out of the game, and the ball can be taken any way they want, even by killing others. Only if the ball falls behind the board, both teams lose and are removed from the God game. Now then you can ask your questions. The old man asks about what it means that they'll be removed from the game, and the answer turns out to be that they'll just be killed. Sarah begins to use her power and raises her hand, and yellow-colored currents begin to light up in her hand. She talks about expecting something like this from the hard god of this silly game, calling for her gun. In her hands appears a weapon that looks something like a trident, with just the outermost prongs to either side. Our hero starts to stop everyone asking everyone how he can call for weapons, because he had no teachers to teach them. Rayan gets frustrated because God taught everyone how to use guns, but a lot of his questions were never answered. It's all interesting even to someone who follows the game, and the bot starts assuming something God-related. Except he just doesn't answer or finish the sentence and says that God's business is none of his business and throws the ball up. The second game begins, which may be the last for our hero. All this makes his heart beat harder. And the other team must be ready, because without a shred of doubt, it's as if they're ready to kill everyone here. The ball was flying towards the old man, and he was already stretching his arms to catch the ball, happy that they had the ball. However, the ball just flew to his face and sealed him right to the platform. Apparently, it was very painful. The mannequin only now reminds that the ball is quite heavy, but the old man didn't seem to like it very much. The redhead begins to remember how his hands were restrained in the first round, and makes the decision to go after the old man. Just upon hearing this, the blonde rushed into the fight at breakneck speed to kill the old man first. This greatly frightens the old man, who can barely move on his own, and he's frightened of our blonde boy. He's already activated his superpower, and is aiming directly at the old man he's taking out first. But it wasn't that easy, because the old man's partner immediately set up her weapon to block our killer's sword. Already angry as if he were Gats from Berserk, he orders Sarah to get out of his way and stay out of his way. Oskastaya turned out to be just like him, and talked about how she hated people like the blonde, arrogant, and anxious assassins. While the two of them were fighting, our hero looked towards the old man, realizing that the ball carrier didn't need to fight or move. It occurs to him that the old man is just trying to survive this game by grabbing the ball in his hands. The mannequin watching all this is apparently very surprised at what he's seeing right now. Our hero calls the old man to him, and the man looks nervously in his direction as if he had seen a wild beast. However, it was too late, as Mike Tyson was already flying to take the ball away with his trademark hook. He ran with all his might to win, and in this round, attack from the back. Except that the old man's hand grabbed the cane that was lying on the ground and lifted him up. A decrepit old man with a cane in his hand stood looking at the shadow that flew straight toward him. Jumping as high as possible, our hero accelerated to deliver the strongest blow with his fist. The old man saw that our hero was attacking without a weapon and wondered what a hopeless guy he was and raised his cane. He praised our hero for being too brave a guy and pressed some button on his cane. At the bottom of the cane was some sort of mechanism similar to how safes are opened. And all the metal got out of there was only a hole. Looks like this old man is a class mage. The cane itself is held by the old man like a musket, and the cane seems to be his weapon. Takeda, who was watching, shouted our hero's name and was distracted by him. The old man apologizes to our hero, pointing his cane directly at him and holding the ball in his hands. Our hero continued to fly towards the old man with clenched teeth, and from the cane appeared some kind of fiery hurricane flying directly at him. But Ryan didn't despair because he still had a way out of this situation, and he could still escape even from this attack. Suddenly, the moment of danger dawned on his eyes, which began to glow a bright purple color, leaving a light behind them. As the fire flew toward him, he saw a path straight into the old man's neck, as if time had settled down around him for a moment. And only if our hero sacrifices his hand now, he will be able to win this battle and defeat the old man. After all, the same path out of the blue he saw when he fought Tengen in the first round, diligently reaching for something. He is completely filled with confidence in victory, for if he hesitates, he may die, and the same thing will happen again as in the first round. It's time for him to act without any hesitation, a strong swing that cuts through the air, and piercing even through a huge wave of fire, which he disperses with his arm and strength. While the old man stood there not realizing what was going on, our hero struck him a blow right in the face across the fire. As a result of such a strong blow, the old man immediately lost his balance and his whole body hit the platform from below. The fire was still going up, and only our hero stood with fire in his eyes and his hand, which was now all burned from the fire. Such a sight surprised not only Takeda, who was worried about him, but also interested whoever was watching all of this. Except that the path still didn't clear and pointed straight at the old man's neck, it was necessary to kill him. The old man was already lying squirming in pain. If now our hero will step on his skull, he will be able to kill and win without a doubt. But he could no longer feel his hand, and looked at the old man silently without taking any other action. Our hero takes the side of good as always, saying that killing this unarmed, unknowing old man is the only way out. Without killing anyone, our hero silently raises the orb, and someone's voice says that his eyes are the same. Suddenly, someone's voice once again told our hero that this was his power, and it really got his attention. It was at this point that he thought about it, because neither Era nor the god himself had said that magic existed here. And our hero can't ignore the fact that his eyes can see what other people's eyes can't. When our hero got distracted, Takeda decided to cheer up and crinkled his nose at the redhead to finish that decrepit old man off. However, he looked at the old man again, and before his eyes the line just started to disappear, and it made him wary. He too began to panic because his so-called path of violence suddenly disappeared, even though the old man is right in front of him. Suddenly there was a sound, and a picture of someone being punched through the heart area completely, and even a sword sticking out from the other side. Our hero was just standing there doing nothing, and only now heard the sound. He turned sharply in the very direction from which the crunch was heard. There, as soon as he looked, there was a picture of Takeda being pierced through the heart area by the enemy. And after that, he began to fall, and our hero kept shouting his name, but the weapon was still sticking out of his back. Then the same Sarah who disabled the redhead's partner jumps right in front of him, telling him that he shouldn't hesitate. Sarah began to gather all her power in her hand. It seems she is actually an apostle of Zeus, the god of lightning. A sudden leap forward that was accomplished using the very same superpower. She's going to hit our hero, saying that cowards like Rayon should have died in the first round. The redhead does nothing but stare at the fist that flies right at his face. It seemed that this very moment was a turning point for him, and some threads began to tear at his mind. He sharply and quickly dodged a blow that could have killed her, which was clearly unexpected for her. But even for our hero, she was still a strong opponent because her speed was much greater than Tengen's. When our hero was planning his escape from below, an old man who had already regained consciousness grabbed him by the leg, not even allowing him to move. Seeing the old rat that attacked him from under the sly, he was also thunderstruck. When he was distracted by this moment, someone else took advantage of it, and Sarah's knee was already flying straight at the cabin of our hero. One blow and that's it. Our hero's pupils were already gone and his mouth began to bleed. Apparently, he accidentally bit his tongue. Such a strong blow even stretched his face all over, and he flew back with incredible force. He's about to repeat another combo using his legs, and from the turnaround, he's already preparing his leg for the kick. Another punch, but our hero seems to put up a block just in time to soften the force of the blow, and Sarah gets too caught up in beating up Rayan. A full circle of scrolling, after which now our hero began to spin like a squirrel in a wheel in the air. In his mind, he kept telling himself that he had to be stronger and endure all these blows to stay alive. Rayan began to realize that he just needed to stall for time with the orb in his hands and began to think of a plan to win. While he was trying to get up again and start another round, Sarah had already come to him with impossible speed as if teleported. Our hero also subconsciously realized that no one could move at such an impossible speed, looking directly at Sarah. At this dangerous moment, he also realized that she too had powers that she used to overpower physical abilities. The redhead tried to realize the truth of the power that was within him, but Sarah kept hitting him like a punching bag. The force of the blow was the same as the tank created for the assault, and our hero even flew into the air, losing consciousness for a while. You can tell from his eyes that he won't be able to hold on much longer, because at this rate he will definitely lose this round. The mannequin looking at all of this was just saying that he was very interested in watching all of this, and thinks about what talent Sarah has as she stands and prepares to use a mighty attack to finish this battle. Rayan still can't find the answer to the question of how to gain and use his power. He doesn't even have the strength to stand up. It all comes down to the fact that he doesn't deserve to be in this place that's more like hell on earth. He starts having flashbacks with philosophical thoughts. He didn't understand what he wanted and why he was doing it. Losing was very close and the end was near, for his partner lay with a weapon sticking out on his back. He himself can barely move at all because the blows he's received are causing him pain he's never experienced before. But why would he want to do that? But he doesn't give up the thought of continuing the battle, and the old man says to do himself a favor. Standing with the two of them, he asks that our hero just give them the ball without too much fighting. However, he just stood there staring at them without saying anything, and even in his thoughts, he only had the wasteland. At that moment, our partner Takeda, who had regained consciousness, was coming up from behind the old man. As soon as he stood up, the wound opened and the blood still continued to flow in rivers, but he was unlikely to give up. Getting to his feet, he began to reach up to his headboard to pull out the weapon that was sticking out of him. He finally got it sober, but the pain still lingered and blood gushed from the wound. Aggression and malice began to fill his soul and body. Darkness seemed to hover around this guy. His anger was incomparable to any other, and his eyes glowed with a golden bright light. But Sarah kept approaching our hero, with words about how his pain could be stopped if you gave them the ball. The mannequin at this point decided to seem to penetrate into the brain of our protagonist, making him think about why he fights at all. The butler made him wonder why he wanted to survive without knowing anything about what he might lose. But our hero is still hoping for something, and if necessary will find a new incentive to continue to live. He still had the ball in his hands, and the only thing he wants is to know the truth. Laughing, our hero asked the two men jokingly if the pain could actually be stopped. They stood and looked at our hero as if he were some kind of madman, and an old man behind him told him to stop. Our hero started jumping back, saying that the old man is really right, to knows a lot about this world. And Rayan began to fall into the abyss with the words that pain really can be stopped just like that, and spun off the platform. He was still holding the ball in his hands, which he wanted to jump with, and just hung next to the cliff thinking about how that was pretty close to dying. He was held there by Sarah, who yelled at him for being a madman who was determined to kill everyone standing there. Together they pulled our hero back to the platform, still going on about how if he wanted to die, he should jump, leaving the ball behind. Moving our hero inside the platform again, they began to rest and relax, thinking it was all over. Our dead inside Kaneki Ken decided to ask them about why they want to live and what they work so hard for in each round. Sarah could not calm down after the actions of our hero and walked as if she wanted to beat him again. With eyes as red as a vampire's, she said she had no business talking to someone like our hero. Suddenly there was the sound of some sort of transition that alerted Sarah and forced her to focus fully. The old man called Sarah by name and everyone looked at him with complete shock, even our hero. The old man was talking about something he was truly sorry for, and our hero's amethyst Galzea kept looking at the old man's decrepit voice. There, the old man was trusubed through by the protagonist's partner, who was finally able to recover. It was something shocking to see HS Sarah than what was a true Parelos moment for her. Takeda pulled the weapon out of the old man's body after the blow, and the old man rolled and fell. And Takeda was full of anger and aggression, with red, fierce eyes looking at his enemies, saying that it was worth it to finish him off after the blow. Sarah was already flying towards Takeda, fully immersed in berserk mode, and Takeda dropped his sword to then deliver the final blow. The dark man lay next to a pool of blood that painted the platform a bright red color. Our hero just kept watching it all, talking in his mind to himself that he had originally moved everything that was happening now. As Rayan stepped off the platform, he forced Smaru and Jurin to focus on them, forgetting about Takeda and giving him time to recover. In front of his eyes, the course of the battle immediately changed in their favor, and this is the moment he should take advantage of right now. Looking at the old man, he doesn't understand whether he can do something or not. And the old man started talking about how he was just afraid of being exhausted from blood loss, his whole body and face turning pale with every secunda. The old man's answer to his question about the meaning of life seemed to shake him, and he completely changed his opinion of him. He talks about how they don't know anything about each other or themselves either. Maybe everyone here has a mesmia waiting for them at home, but they don't remember anything. And the worst part of all of this is that they don't remember anything about their home, so they don't feel anything when they are told about their family. He also remembered the paper on which it was written that our hero was looking for his sister and that he was still very young. And after all, there's no point in them all fighting among themselves unless it's out of fear of death. And yet everyone here fears only death and the endless darkness that comes after death, and in order to suppress that fear, they create their own story. Our hero decides to ask the old man about whether he remembers the very stories we don't seem to understand about. The old man had a negative answer, because according to him, all the memories are in his subconscious behind a door to which he has no key. The old man had already consumed too much Crosby, but our hero standing in front of him wanted to add a few more points. He also decided to ask about whether fear was enough to accept that they had taken someone else's life for their own. And is it enough to look at what we're still willing to do? And Takeda keeps hitting Sarah back. The old man, knowing that his end is coming soon, starts crying on his knees, and a piece of paper with information about the biography is sticking out of his pocket. The only thing he wants to do before he dies is to enjoy the nature that surrounds him right now. Without feelings already with disabled eyes of foresight, our hero continued to look at the old man who was losing his strength. Lowering his head, the old man said what Nakwenu had begun to see while spewing liters of blood. They've all got 3 minutes left and no time for all the tenderness they're doing now. Our hero finally came to his senses and began to think that the ball is in their possession, and now Sarah will not win because the ball has been in their possession for too long. Their battle was still going on as they were both equal in strength and ability, and Takeda was already talking about how this was the end for Sarah. Only Sarah doesn't like it, because if this is the end, she has to kill herself or jump off the platform voluntarily. Suicide might be an easier solution to this problem than seeing the evil eye with the punishment that God has in store for her. The hopelessness began to weigh heavily on the girl's psyche, whose face began to squirm with fear. She grabbed her trident with all her might, preparing for another round to defeat Takeda. Her partner is already out of this world, and he realizes what he's already losing on points right now. But in any case, time continues to run out and she has another full 3 minutes to turn the tide of the battle. In an instant, she teleported and disappeared right in front of Takeda, who couldn't even catch a trace of her. Takeda was clearly shocked at what he had just seen, for even his abilities didn't give even a chance in glare. And if right now she can kill these two in 3 minutes, she will continue her life in this hellish place. She decided to choose our hero as her first victim, and stabbed him right in the back while he wondered about her power. Our hero, after guessing, finally realized that her power is wind. This power is the same as that old man's, and the concept is also similar. Now his eyes finally see the way he moves, and she gets wind currents. She hit him, and now our Egrom flew up and got hit in the leg. However, our Harriet continued to hold the ball in his hands anyway, and now the wind in front of him became too fast. As he flew down, Sarah was already on top of him, and was about to strike his head with her trident to penetrate his skull. The sudden strike, like a golden spear, increased the sheer volume of the weapon, making the area of impact much larger. The tip of its sharp end began to burn with fire, though before it was the element of lightning. This was the moment when his eyes began to see the truth in her power. This was his chance for victory. But despite the prehensile Gans, he continued to fall down, looking at the weapon that was flying straight towards him. Takeda started screaming our hero's name to cheer him up and raise his aggression and motivation to fight. It seemed too late to do anything about it, because Sarah was too close and there was no way to dodge her blow. Dumial continued to watch with no small amount of interest at the whole fight that kept going on. Sarah hits our hero, who sets up in front of her a ball that is meant to be played. The force of that ball against his ribs could easily grind his bones to powder inside. This intense pressure made our hero feel another pain, and now his mouth is a fontaine of blood. Sarah goes into frenzy mode because even in such a seemingly lose-lose situation, our Egroy was able to think of something and survive or soften the blow. But except Ran would be more surprised if a god created a ball that is incapable of taking a weak hit. At that moment, our Takeda came up and helped our hero to remove Sarah, who was sucking on his body like a leech. Now they both came together as a single room. They just needed to hold on for a few more minutes to survive. Our Igrom begins to explain to the guide that Sarah's power works like a switch, strong, weak, and calm. Ducking her head, Sarah begins to call out to Yeru, lowering her weapon down, and asks the mannequin why it does this and what purpose these gods serve. Takeda and our hero Rayan looked on in utter shock at Sarah, who was just saying something about herself. With tears in her eyes, she said that she just didn't want to die here, and that she was just scared to be in the darkness. After her words in the head of our hero comes the images of those people from whom he has taken lives before this moment. The kind-hearted hero goes to Sarah to calm her down, but Takeda stops him, saying it's not over yet. But their words did not seem to be understood by the mannequin, who was just watching and observing them. He points to the taser and says they only have 1 minute left in the game. Wiping her tears with her glasses raised, Sarah begins to tell her story with Jurin. Jurin always was and looked like a calm and level-headed old man who wouldn't hurt anyone. But only this calmness is clearly not in the character of Sarah, who still does not give up and continues to use its power. Level-headedness isn't what she's looking for, because now that every second counts, it's time to unleash her full power. The mannequin begins to say that when life is on the brink of death, people's despair takes over and gives them the impetus to grow. She awakens the power hidden in herself. The mannequin has apparently given her a lot of motivation with his words about life and death and how he sees it all in his eyes. Our hero demands that his partner forget all the information that he himself gov before, because now it is both amplified and accelerated. After all, he realized all of this by what he just saw with his own eyes. It made Takeda wary. And his partner responds by hoping that his eyes are just deceiving him, because otherwise they could really play out. The timer showed a time of 50 seconds, and it kept ticking. The time was coming to an end. Our hero was getting ready to finish this round because he only had to last 1 minute, but the wind was blowing in his face. So along with the wind came Sarah, who was moving at the same speed as the speed of sound, that she wasn't even swept away. A violent impact that looks like he was hit by a truck at high speed, and it caused a yantan from our hero's mouth. The ball fell completely out of his hands. He couldn't hold it any longer, and flew far away. In addition, Sarah began aiming her weapon directly at him, using it as an arrow. She ended up throwing her weapon towards our hero to seal him along with her weapon. The strong velocity of the throw was able to break through the sound barrier, causing rings of ongonium to appear around the flight site. Our hero fell on his back, seemingly having lost his consciousness from such a kudar, and the dust on his back exploded like a nuclear BGMBA. When he just relaxed when he landed, a huge trident flew into his shoulder and blocked him. With a single movement of the wind, it moves only a few meters and stops. Despite the fact that they were given the same amount of time to develop, Sarah was in any case much stronger than the others. She pulled out her weapon, but our hero tried to rouse himself to demand that he get up himself, but Rayan's body didn't react. Our Geoi began to fear that she would now kill our hero right now, and he would never get to the truth again. This moment is the last of his life, and now nothing else can help him. But Sarah misses her punch and hits only the platform next to our hero's head, and he doesn't realize what happened. Sarah was also in a complete misunderstanding of the 100. Even her Zarkaz Kamenchki was a fraction of a second away from her first kill streak of the round. And there was not one more hand that she held her trident. Apparently someone cut off her hand before killing the hero. Her arm that had been severed along with the stock fell down, no longer being a part of her body. She started screaming in pain, holding her hand, still not understanding what had just happened. Rayan, on the other hand, looked at her, feeling sorry for her. Here, personally, I think he should be more cruel and finally adapt. With eyes red with anger, Sarah looked towards Takeda, realizing that he had done it. Takeda's response was that she had forced him to do so herself, but she shoved the weapon in her hands. It seems our hero's partner has decided to show his true power after all, and has now discovered the ability to control fire. She shouted at him about how he knew all along how to use his ability, asking why he was still hiding it. He just didn't want Rayan to know about his abilities, because he had hidden his trump cards in games like this before. Unlike her, Takeda decides to play more stealthily without drawing attention to herself. This pisses her off more. Her strength seems to be reaching its maximum capacity, for now she can even break the platform beneath her. Sarah decides that if she kills him before he can use his power, she can win now. Our hero watched the fight intently, for most would not see what was happening now, but only he could see it. There, Takeda had already put his sword in the proper stance, and got into a swordsman's stance himself, using his latent power. Turning around, he began to power his sword with more fire energy, and co-created more fire near the ball, and pointed the sword upwards, sending the fire phoenix into heavenly flight, and in front of him was a huge blade. Such a blow created a huge wave of fire around Sarah that obscured everything that was going on here. Sarah herself was hit the hardest, as the concentrated stream of fire struck her right in the middle of her body. Turns out that Takeda has the same ability as Diluc from Genshin Impact, dispatching his celestial phoenix after a hit. Watching the spectacle of the tsunami of fire, he began to remember how he had killed Tengen thinking he was strong. But as soon as he saw Sarah and Takeda, those two monsters, he realized he was far from the strongest. Now he was finally beginning to realize that there were competitors several times his strength. After that blow, blood spilled like a bucket over the entire platform on which they were fighting. Sarah was bleeding as if someone had cut an artery, and the exertion of breath that followed didn't help her. While he stooped on his knees, Takeda put his sword right in front of her, and Rona looked up in fear. Silently, he just looked down at her, and Sarah kept saying that she couldn't die so easily and so miserably. Can't die here. The main thing is to die not in this game of a ruthless god to whom it's all just entertainment no more. Now she's the one who's killed by someone she doesn't even know. It's all scary and makes her hate herself. The last 50 seconds to the end of the game, and in all that time, Takeda hadn't said a single word in her direction, silently staring at her. She looked at our hero and shouted that a weakling like him is not worthy of living in this game. Such a pathetic, worthless idiot simply cannot continue to exist here and will not go any further in this game. She doesn't even know who she really is, but she's already saying goodbye to her life. Takeda finally, after being a statue, starts moving towards her, lifting his legs. The last 10 seconds to the end of the game, and Takeda starts talking about how sorry he is, apologizing to Sarah. In the last 5 seconds, Sarah starts sobbing hard, saying that her little brother is missing and begging for mercy from the killers and God. The completely emotionless Takeda takes his sword after her words, saying he's going to end her pain right now. Now even our soft-hearted hero doesn't interfere, and just watches everything that happens from afar. Here comes the final blow that ends the whole game. Once again, someone's life is ruined, and another soul who became a toy for a cruel god is destroyed. Dummy starts clapping for the winners, congratulating the two of them for winning this round. Now they finally won the second round, and were able to survive and become a strong contender. After the end of the timer, all of our hero's wounds began to heal on their own, and not even a single trace was left. His hand with its unthinkable burns also managed to regenerate, and he can't believe he survived after all. All of this can't help but slave, despite the fact that a few victims were taken. A bit sloppy, but in any case they survived. But something makes even Takeda freeze with either fear or surprise. It was the face of our protagonist, who was smiling at his hand, as if he were some kind of psychopath who liked killing people for fun. Abruptly, he takes a selfie of himself by the side of his face, booked to stop himself from smiling and laughing. Takeda, worrying about him, asks if he's okay, and he responds positively. But here, Takeda himself was surprised at how skillful he was at manipulating opponents by jumping off the platform with the ball, but wants him to stop. Toward the end, a door finally opens and appears that leads to a restroom after all the hell they came through. But what a challenge awaits them next.